and happy Sunday to you. It's Sarah from Funky Fossil here. I've got a bit of a croaky throat today, so apologies if I'm sounding a bit a bit more snuffy than usual. But I really wanted to still get together with you this weekend, have a bit of a play in our journals, and in particular to put the kind of spotlight onto gesso and the various effects you can get with gesso and why it can be such a fantastic resource to use when building up your layers, getting soft dreamy backgrounds, using it with your stencils. There's lots and lots you can do with gesso, which I think makes it a really kind of, I suppose, a workhorse in our stash. So I've got some ideas of things I want to try out with gesso today. I don't have necessarily an end point in mind in terms of what my page might end up looking like, but that doesn't matter, right? We can still kind of have a bit of a play and see where all of that takes us. So I've got one of my kind of junky art journals in front of me. I also have another one here to off the side, so I've got a couple of surfaces to play on, and the reason I wanted to have a couple of different surfaces is to explore the different kind of qualities that gessos can offer us on our base page. So most of you will probably be aware that gesso is effectively a primer. It's a kind of a medium that you can put onto your surface to ensure that it's ready to take your paints or inks or whatever colour you're going to want to add. So it will enable papers or other surfaces like MDF, for example, that aren't necessarily ready. They're not primed for the work that you want to do on them. It's going to give them a protective coat and also some tooth, and that tooth will grab or will enable the medium to move on top of the surface without it kind of being absorbed straight in. So for example, here I've got a piece of my MDF. You can see just that kind of uh, uh, wood substrate, and I painted this with white gesso before I did anything over the top of it, because if you paint directly onto your MDF, sometimes that can be quite a thirsty surface and it will absorb a lot of paint very quickly. So by putting the gesso over the top, you're almost kind of sealing the MDF, and it enables you to work on top of that much more easily. And that's exactly what gesso does in our journal pages. So often we work with mixed media paper or papers that are designed to take a lot of kind of wet mediums. But when you're working in a journal like this, where you might kind of have bits of copy paper that you've dyed, you might have a kind of just exercise book paper, old book pages, these surfaces aren't necessarily designed to take a lot of wet mediums, but we still want to work on them because they're going to look fantastic. So gesso can really help us out with that. And there are loads and loads of types of gesso out there. I've got just white gesso and clear gesso on hand here, but it does come in black and gold and different colours. So there's lots for you to explore if you want to try out different techniques with gesso. But I'm going to stick to the white and the clear today. And even in the white and the clear, then the gesso can come in different strengths. Like your acrylic paints, you can get kind of fluid acrylics right the way through to heavy body acrylics. And here I've got a Liquitex super heavy gesso, and it feels heavy actually. And that's, as you can see in the pot there, is not very liquid. So that's going to enable us to create some quite textured effects. I have another Liquitex gesso here, which is a much more fluid one, and I can literally just tip this out of the bottle and that just runs straight onto the page. So that's a great one for softer washes. So let me explain. So on this page here, I don't know if you can pick it up on the camera, but I put down some of the heavy body gesso, and I put it down in a very rough, kind of uneven way. I used a palette knife. So that's got some texture already built into the page, and that's sitting nice and kind of on top of that paper. Whereas on these pages here, this kind of old map and book pages, I use the liquid gesso and just did a fairly light wash. I even diluted it a little bit, so I wanted it to be fairly transparent, so that I could still see the pattern or the quality of the paper that I was working on underneath. So that's still sealed it, still given me a nice surface to work on, but I've not completely covered up the paper that I'm working on, and that's what the more liquid gesso has enabled me to do. I'd have to dilute the heavy body gesso quite a lot to be able to get it to provide a light wash like I got on the map there. And then the clear gesso, which lo and behold is clear. So I've got some clear gesso on this pattern paper here, and I can feel it. It's given it quite a coarse texture, but as you can see, it hasn't covered up the pattern at all. So if I now want to work on top of that, I'm still going to have all the qualities of that the gesso is going to give me, but I can still see the layers beneath. And that's a great option if you started to do work already and you've got colour down, but you want to work on top. Maybe your colours are water reactive. If you put a light coat of clear gesso over the top, trying to be careful not to move your colour too much when you put that gesso over it, then it will seal it and you can carry on working without disturbing the layers you've already built. So clear gesso can be almost kind of an intermediate layer just to enable you to keep working over the top. But I thought I like this pattern paper. I do want to add some colour and do some stenciling on it, but I don't want to completely lose the effect of that paper from the start. So clear gesso is helping me with that. So I've got my heavy body gesso, my kind of lighter weight white gesso, and the clear one. I say I've got Liquitex, but that's just because that's what I happen to have. I know there are lots of fabulous brands out there, so you may well already have one that you're happy to use. So rather than applying the gesso and having the dry time, I've done that up front. And as I say here on this paper, which was already quite a rough watercolory fibrous paper, I've added the thick gesso quite thickly, quite unevenly. So I used a palette knife, dolloped it on, even kind of pressed into that gesso to create some unevenness in the coverage. If you wanted to as well, another great effect would be while it was wet, you could scribble into it with something like a kebab stick and give yourself even more texture, and all of that will reveal itself when you put the colour on top. So what I want to do now is get playing. So I've gessoed my pages basically with these various different types of gesso, and I want to have a bit of a try and experiment to see different looks we might get. I've got some sprays, I've got some acrylic ink, I've got some acrylic paint, I have my a range of well-loved stencils that I will use, I think, for different kind of backgrounds on these pages, and I'll talk about them as and when I put them into use. I've got some Neocolors crayons, and these are the water reactive crayons, so I'm going to do a bit of blending with my gesso because it's perfect for giving really soft, dreamy looks. And I've got some pastels as well, which is similar to the crayons in that you can mix them with your gessos to really soften the look of that colour on your page. And I think that's everything I've got now. If we get all of those used today, we'll have done very well, I think. It'll have been a very productive Sunday morning. So what should we do first and foremost? I'm quite interested to see how some ink will respond to the text we've got here, because I'm wanting to see whether by putting something quite a fluid colour over the top of our gessoed page, whether it will bring that texture out. So let's see whether we can get a cool effect with that. I'm just going to try and put, it's not going to give me much protection. I'm just going to put a little bit of scrap paper behind this page, because when you're working on these uneven journal pages, I don't mind colour kind of moving onto different layers, but sometimes it's worth just having a bit of protection in the background. So I'm going to go with sepia because that's a fairly neutral colour, and therefore if I decide to carry on working over this page, I'll have something that just has warmed the paper up rather than putting a strong first colour down. So I've done nothing. This is all dry, and let's just see how this acrylic ink moves over the top of our gesso surface. Generous helping there of water. Well, I can already see some of that texture emerging. I'm going to just get my fingers in there, I hope you don't mind. I want to move fairly quickly this morning because, as you've seen, how many things I want to try. And there is a fantastic texture just coming through. I'm not going to leave it as dark as this. I do want to just almost have a bit of a glaze. And this is one of those fantastic things where you can't remember, oh, I can't remember quite how I put the texture on. So it kind of, the reveal of the reveal of that texture is really cool. It looks like an old plastered wall now, and it feels really it feels really textured to the finger. I know I've just taken loads of colour off. I just want to see how it moves with the brush. Definitely want some liquid on it to keep it moving. Yeah, really nice. And you see, let me just show you, I hadn't gessoed all the way up, right the way up to the edge of the page. So you get a difference in shading here. You can see where the gesso literally ends. So this paper here has grabbed that colour much more quickly and somebody absorbed it in. Whereas I've been able to continue working over the gessoed area because it's not kind of drinking that ink in quite so quickly. So you've got a bit more working time when you gessoed a surface. But it's also really cool to have those areas on your page where maybe you don't have gesso and you get these kind of almost like that look of, say, of a plastered wall. So you don't need to necessarily be perfect in applying your gesso. So I think, there we go. And the joy of this, of course, with gesso is if I end up deciding when I come back to doing a bit more on this page that colour's too dark, I can add some more gesso over the top. So it's just a continuing process. But the texture you've got there, because it's a heavy body gesso, I think looks really nice. Really aged and worn. Right, what should we do on this page here, which has got the clear gesso on? Because it has clear gesso on, I'm minded to do a bit of stencil lifting because that is a really cool technique. Let's do that. Let me get a stencil. So I think this one, I'm not sure what it's called. I think it might be called Polite Society. It's almost kind of a leafy one. It's a nice repeating pattern that's not too big. So when you're doing a stencil lift, actually I said I would do that. I think I might do a bit of a blend first. No, I'm going to do a stencil lift first. Apologies for the indecision there. So with a stencil lift, what you're wanting to do is remove the colour from the stencil pattern. So you need to put your colour down on your page and then put the stencil over and lift the colour from through it. And I've typically found this most effective when you've got gesso on your page, because as I was saying before, as we saw here, if your page is not primed and it absorbs the medium straight away, then when you try and lift the pattern or the colour from within the stencil, it can sometimes have already sunk into the page. So having a protective surface like my gesso on here will hopefully help me with this. So I've got a deep green acrylic from Amsterdam, which is a very kind of soft body acrylic. So this, I'm sure this brush has still got some of the, just going to tap a bit of water in. It's still got some of the acrylic ink on, but it'll be fine. Okay, so I've got a reasonably good coverage there. Let's put our stencil over the top. Let's just get a little bit of pitching now and spritz with water. Obviously the moisture will help lift the acrylic paint, and just rub over the top. You could do this with baby wipes as well if you use those in your crafting. Try not to use too many of them these days. But also this kitchen towel is kind of disintegrating on me as well. Now I love this effect because it's uneven. It's not going to give you a perfect stencil, but it does reveal again that aged look. Let's see how that's come through. Perfect. So can you see? Lifting this up. Can you see how that's lifted some of the paint, but it hasn't damaged the paper because it had that gesso on it, so that paint didn't completely get sucked in by the paper. I'm not really liking that. So my feeling is once this is dry, I think I'll probably go in on this side and put the paint, that same paint colour, through the stencil just to start to build that spread up. And where, for example, I'm feeling this is a little bit too kind of harsh, the end line, I'm just going to rub some gesso over that with my finger to do some blend it all together, which we'll do in a little while. Right, I'm going to move on to my other journal now, but let me just have a quick dry off and try and untack my hands, and we'll get back onto those other pages where we've put the light wash over the map and the book paper. So I've had a very quick tidy up, although that didn't seem to extend to my hands, so apologies for that. So I'm going to try and do a few techniques fairly quickly here so that the video isn't too long. And what I'm going to do on these pages, these are the ones where I've used that light wash of the thinner gesso, so you can still see the map and the book paper beneath them. Is I want to try and unify these a little bit with some Neocolor crayons and some pastel, and blend it out with that gesso to add a little bit of colour across both parts of this spread that are going to kind of bring it together a little bit. So I'm putting some of this gesso, I would do, but it's blocked at the top. Put some of this gesso out on my side here, and you can see how runny that is compared to the heavy body. I'm just going to add some colour with our crayons. These crayons, I say, the Neocolors are water soluble, so once we add the gesso to them, they will respond to that moisture and blend, and it will give it a nice kind of dreamy soft look. So I'm just literally scribbling the colour on, and I can feel the bits where there is gesso where there isn't actually. I can almost feel that kind of coarseness of the gesso on the surface. Bit of brown. And all this is going to blend together, so this is a really lovely part of the process because you can just have fun with your colour, knowing that gesso is going to soften it all down. Let's use a bit of pastel, soft pastel as well. Let's see how that responds to the gesso. I'm going with colours that are in a reasonably similar kind of colour scheme. Um, so it will hopefully that they'll work reasonably well together. And I'm just going to pick up this gesso on my finger and start to rub that over the areas that we've added the colour to. You can see immediately how that is transformed into a much softer, dreamier look rather than the scribbles. Although sometimes I quite like to leave some of those marks, those kind of expressive marks from the crayon visible as well. I don't necessarily always want to blend everything in. And this is responding differently at the top here where there isn't gesso. It's still working because the gesso is obviously going to work on pretty much every surface. That's its purpose, but it's slightly different in how it's responding on the ungessoed surface to the one where we've already got that wash down. And this is obviously a thinner paper, the map paper, just an old road map, I think. So just sometimes just be a little bit more gentle. You can see that there. And you could carry on and do the whole surface if you wanted to, or as I've done here, distribute that colour from different parts of the page, kind of going with my rule of 3. And then really it's a matter of how you want to work and build up the page. Sometimes I quite like to kind of go back in and leave some slightly whiter marks from the gesso itself, not having everything completely blended. But what we do have with this is we still have visibility of the fact that there was a book page and a map, and we've still got a nice area here in the middle of that layout that we're going to be able to add a focal point or further layers to, where we haven't lost the detail of the pages that we began with, which is quite often the joy of this kind of journaling, where you've used different papers to create your base layers. You don't always want to kind of remove the character that they're providing to the journal. So I'm going to leave that one there. You can see how the water reactive crayons, the soft pastels have really kind of blended beautifully with the with that gesso over the top, and created a really kind of soft, dreamy spread without, as I say, completely covering over that base layer. So there's another way of using your gesso to start build the colour on the page, soften it as you go, spread it, and use your mediums like your pastes and crayons and pastels to combine that colour on your page. So I've let my pages have a bit of drying time, and this is all now dry here. I love it. I think it's looking great with that kind of soft merging of the colours. And the first pages that we were working on at dry too, this took quite a while to dry because I did absolutely cover it in acrylic ink and spraying the water on. So that did take a little bit of time, but it is now dry. I'm just going to do one more gesso based technique for this video, and then what I might do in terms of kind of carrying on working on the pages is just do a bit of a speed up in terms of where I go from here, because obviously we're not going to completed both spreads with a further demo, but I do want to do gesso resist. I've done a video on this in the past. It's just another fun way of incorporating gesso onto your pages and getting kind of soft layers and textures that aren't necessarily kind of completely stand out, but they're going to draw the eye in to the page. So what we'll do is put the gesso through the stencil. I'm using code here. This is one of my favourite stencils, as you can see by how dirty it is. So I'm going to put the gesso through code, and then we'll put some ink over the top, and the gesso will softly resist it. So won't necessarily get the kind of the strongest impression of the stencil, but there will be the gesso won't necessarily take on all the colour we add on over the top. The other thing I thought I'd try this with the thick body acrylic gesso, which is new to me, and I thought, well, I'll try actually applying it with a palette knife, because it's pretty close to having the consistency of a paste. So this will add a bit more dimension and texture to the page. Normally I would sponge the gesso through with a cosmetic sponge when I'm using one of the thinner ones, but I thought this looked like it might actually work through the stencil on a palette knife, so we shall see. So I've just got my scrap paper off to the side there on the page so I don't add stenciling where I don't want it. That's worked really lovely. So there we go, gesso as a texture paste. So of course this will resist the ink slightly, because of course when you add texture paste to a project, the raised surface of it means that the colour often travels around the design. So this is going to add some fantastic texture to the page. So I'm just going opposite corner here. This is a really uneven surface I'm now stenciling onto, because this journal already has quite a few pages with stuff on them, so I can already tell this is going to be a slightly less precise stencil design, but it's still pretty good. So there we go, we've now stenciled with our gesso. It's given us lovely details. So, I mean, you could leave that white on the page, and all of this is starting to kind of build and build on top of that map and the book page, or we could go back in once this is dry and add some colour and see how that resist works. So I'm going to let that dry for a second, or more than a second probably, and we'll be back to see how it takes the colour. I think our thick gesso is now dried, so we've got that raised stencil texture on the page. This one, I can't tell whether there's still a bit of moisture in this paper, or whether that's just the nature of the matte paper, but it certainly feels dry to the touch. So I've just got some paper behind each of my pages in the journal, so I can spray some ink over our stenciling and just see whether the gesso gives us a nice resist effect. So I'm looking for quite a soft look here, given we've got this lovely dreamy blended background going on. I've got, by way of sprays, I've got Unravelled, which has got some mica in it, I think. I can't remember the last time I used this. And I do have a brown distress spray stain, ground espresso, and I'm hoping that still sprays. We shall find out. So let's start with the lighter colour, because then that will dilute the darker brown if we find that's a bit strong. Oh, at least this sprays nicely. It's a nice colour. A bit like antique linen. So let's add a bit of a darker brown. Oh yeah, that's certainly still spraying okay. Can you see how this ungessoed cardstock here is literally sucking that colour straight in? That will not move now, or not move much. Whereas on the page here, we've still got the opportunity to manipulate that colour. So that's a really good demonstration of how some cardstocks will take that colour straight away and pull it into the page. So I've distracted myself there, haven't I? So you can see my sprays are travelling across the page. And just knock them back a little bit. But the key thing is that our gesso, or our stenciled gesso, is gesso stencil, the stenciling basically is still staying visible. Now, to be fair, because I've added this in a dimensional way, if I'd used paste and then put sprays over it, probably would give me a similar effect as well, where the colour will pool around the dimension you created. But it's cool that we've been able to do it with gesso on this occasion. I feel like I need to add a little bit more colour in this corner. It's kind of distracting with the brown off the page because you feel like you've got more colour down than actually you do on the page itself. No, I didn't intend to put that much brown. So it's one of the challenges of the old spray, isn't it? So let me try and take some of this without removing it all, which is what I often seem to do. Like that. So that's given it a lot more richness of colour, hasn't it? And again, because we've got the gesso down on that page, it's still travelling, it's still giving us time to work with it and make decisions. Now I think if I take this away, yeah, I think I'm gonna although this is pooled quite a lot here, so it probably will take a little bit of drying time. Obviously I can use my heat gun. I'm going to let this dark area settle. You can see when I take that away, because I do like that contrast, the depth we get in the corner there. And I could try some of that sepia acrylic ink we started with. See how that moves on here. And then I promise I will step away from the page. And you can see how that ink is immediately travelling where there's already moisture for it to follow. Now this matte paper is quite thin, and I can feel it becoming increasingly fragile as the more and more layers, or the more and more moisture I put on it. So I am going to leave it alone now. The book page is quite robust though. So yeah, I like that. I like the acrylic. But the key element of this is that our stenciling is going to remain visible once those colours have settled and dried. And one of the nice things is that I think this will kind of fade out a little bit, because the gesso will probably soften some of that colour as it settles on the paper. But that is going to take a little bit of drying time, so I'm going to set that to one side, and we will finish the video with a little kind of walkthrough of some next steps that I'm going to take on the journal pages, still using my gesso techniques. Right, I'm just going to finish the video today by doing a little bit more work on these pages. I won't get both of the layouts completed on camera, but certainly you will see the finished results. And all I'm going to do on here now is continue with exactly the same techniques we've been looking at during the course of this video. So I'm going to carry on using my clear and white gesso, my stencil, just to carry on building some layers and just pulling the page together. And then I will find the kind of a focal point that I think works as well. What I have done between the last time I showed you this page and putting the camera back on is I've added some white gesso around the edges here just to soften this block of colour. I've added some more of the thick body gesso over the top of the of this page and done some scribbling in. So hopefully you can see a bit of that texture there coming through. And I added some, as you saw me do on the previous layout, I've added some crayons and some pastels, and rather than blending them with white gesso this time, I used the clear gesso. Of course, that's another great way of blending your colours and getting a kind of soft look, but not necessarily subduing the colours as you will do when you use the white gesso. And the other fantastic benefit of using the clear gesso to blend them is, for example, with the pastel and also with the water soluble crayons, they're now fixed. So by blending them into the page with the gesso, I can work on top of them and they won't continue moving. So what I want to do really is just continue the motifs that this stencil is giving us further into the page, so it's not just sitting there in kind of isolation. And I thought I'd add some some clear gesso through the stencil at the bottom here and do a bit of a resist, and maybe add some of some acrylic paint through the stencil in this corner to pull those corners together as a positive and negative. And let's see where that gets us. So my clear gesso is a fairly liquid one, so I'm going to apply that through the stencil with a cosmetic sponge. Because obviously last time you saw me with a heavy body gesso, pulling that over the stencil with a palette knife, but that really has a very different consistency. For a runnier medium like this, or your runnier acrylic paints, and if you pick it up on your cosmetic sponge and pounce it over the stencil, that's going to be your best way of getting that kind of stencil design to transfer. There may still be a little bit of bleed with this because my pages are very uneven, but certainly the best approach is to go up and down, not move your sponge around in kind of motions. You're kind of really stippling it on there. And of course, with the gesso resist effect, as we've just seen, it's quite a soft look, so you're not necessarily looking to get perfection. What I'm really trying to do here now, as I'm kind of working further into the page, is just to get some degree of repetition of the motif of the stencil. It doesn't need to be a perfect impression every time. So that, I can't even really see yet how that's transferred, but we'll leave it there. Let's put some paint through the stencil this time. I can't remember what colour I used. I think I used this on this piece here on the page. So let's just, I'll just use the same cosmetic sponge because of course the gesso and the clear gesso and the paint aren't going to cause each other any difficulties together. Just, this is quite a nice soft, it's not a heavy body, but it's quite a nice soft body paint, so I find it's quite a stencil friendly one. I'm pulling this down into that whiter area that I've created in the centre of the page. Let's see how it looks. I'm trying to avoid excuse me, I'm trying to avoid kind of any harsh lines in terms of straight lines. I want everything to look like it's fading out quite naturally, which means I keep going further. Well, like that. So can you see how we've got that pattern now running across the page, but here it's the negative, here it's the positive, and we don't know what the resist is going to do yet because we haven't applied colour over it. I might just add a little bit more in this corner here because I'm feeling that's a bit of a kind of a, feels a bit cut off. So let me add some green here through the stencil, and then we're not wasting the paint either. That's nice. Right, well, can't tell if my gesso has dried. Still wet, still moving a little bit. Let me blast that with the heat gun and we'll try some ink over the top. That's drying off. Right. Well, my logic with this kind of technique on a page is it really doesn't matter. I'm going to be adding a colour onto the page that's going to work with the overall layout. So if this doesn't transfer or doesn't resist, it's not going to be visible to anybody looking through it because we've already got our patterning on the page. So this will be an added bonus if I can get some colour to come through. Let's use some of the rustic wilderness because I think as a spray stain that's kind of closest to the greens we've been using. I might, of course, can't really control my spray particularly, so if this goes where I don't want it, I'll just mop it up. Let's have a put some water again. It's a nice green, that rich green. Let's see whether we can see any stencil starting to emerge. Just trying to take it out the seam a little bit because you can see there's some bleed. I'm probably, I was thinking about this earlier, I'm probably going to stick those two pages together so it won't be visible. I can only see the stencil really subtly here, which I might add a bit more of that rustic wilderness though because it looks perfect on the page. Yeah, I don't know if you can catch it. There are little bits of the lines on here of the stencil, but probably not that visible. It's a very subtle hint. So when I was sponging the clear gesso through, I maybe didn't get enough onto the page to give it the opportunity to resist. But I'm going to just add a little bit more of this fabulous green spray just to tie everything together. There we go. And we're going to leave it. I'm loving that it's settling into the lines, the scratch lines in the gesso. So that one, I'm not gonna block that. I'm just gonna let that settle in. Can you see? So I'm super happy with that. What we've done today, hopefully, has given you some ideas in terms of how you can incorporate gesso into your pages over and above priming the paper. You can use it to help you with the stencil lift, with your resisting technique with stencils, with adding the texture to your pages. For your heavy bodied gesso, you can use it through your stencils to give you that added dimension, scratch into it, blend your colours with it to give you those soft dreamy blends in the background. So there is so much potential with the gessos that you probably already have in your craft room, and certainly they're a great tool for building up your layers and enabling you to keep going without worrying about disturbing what you've already put down on the page. So I hope So I'm going to leave our journal pages there for today and carry on working on them off camera. But I hope the techniques I've shared with you today have given you a feel for how versatile gesso can be when you are priming but then building your pages. So we've used it for helping us to lift colour through a stencil. We've used it for resisting colour when using it in stencils. We've used it for creating texture and scratching it in. We've used it for blending colours on the page to give a soft dreamy look, and of course we can use it to fix those layers and carry on working over each of the kind of elements we've added to the page. So definitely look at your gesso as something that can take you beyond just priming your pages, and think about ways you can incorporate them into the techniques you use on your journal pages. I'm sure you have some gesso in your craft room somewhere, and hopefully this video will encourage you to get it out and use it in different ways. Please do like and subscribe to the channel if you don't already. It'd be lovely to have your company on a weekly basis. And also keep an eye out on my Instagram during October, because we're going to be sharing lots more stencil techniques and inspiration over there as well. So if you've enjoyed some of these stencil techniques, certainly if you head over to Instagram, you will see lots more from me there too. All right, I shall leave you to enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and I hope you have a wonderful creative week. Thanks again for watching. Bye for now.